Greetings, everybody. Happy summer. Gosh, I sure hope your day is full of love and kindness. As I say all the time in this broadcast, if we lead our day with love and kindness, so many positive things will happen. I firmly believe we can change the world so fast if we just started with love and kindness. Every conversation, every issue we took on, I think you could solve so much with that. I don't know what you think, Sandy. Is that a good philosophy to be leaving into?
Oh, Todd, do I love to hear that.
I figured you would.
We are one of the same.
I figured you would. I am thrilled with this conversation today. You folks, everybody here that's on the treadmill, hiding from your boss under your desk, driving, whatever you're doing, taking this in, you are in for a fascinating conversation today. You are in to take a journey with me and with my guests that I don't even, it's hard to find the words. We've connected, we've talked. I've had the good fortune of getting through to her book and seeing what it's all about. And her story is a trip, folks. It really is. And we're going to get deep into the weeds about some things today. And hopefully, as we always do on this broadcast, I'm not interested in telling you what to think, but I sure as hell want to make you go think. And I think we're going to do a really good job of that. So without further ado, I want to make a quick introduction, let her share a little bit about her life with you as well. But this is a wellness champion, kids, beyond doubt. She is an author. She's got 3 books out there now. One book is called Get Along with Anyone at Anytime, Anywhere, which is like love and kindness. Talk to me there. Dancing Through Life with Guts, Grace, and Gusto. And the book that we're going to talk about today is A Toxic Brain, Revelations from a Health Journey. And this is really going to open your eyes. She's a speaker. She's a coach. She is truly powering the world of wellness and well-being. Please, everybody, give it up for my friend. And it is an absolute honor to have her here. Sandy Strauss, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I love to write, and I write about things that really fire up my passion. And I have to say, this was a work of absolute commitment to raising awareness of what's happening today.
Yeah, this is unlike, I mean, I've heard you on other podcasts, and I've had the good fortune to look at this book. I've spent time talking. I mean, you and I just BS for 30 minutes before we even started anything, catching up and talking. And not only is this story so powerful, but the way you tell it and the why of how you tell it. And I think that's an important thing to think about in this, the why. Why are you telling this story? When we frame this up and we draw everybody into this, I think, like I said, people are going to be blown away. But before I go into my 5,911 questions that I have and get down this trail, would you mind just kind of introduce yourself a little bit? Because you've got a background in the produce trade. You've been around.
I do.
You have some stories to share.
Oh, I have many stories to share. And I love my time with the produce industry. Basically, my background has involved really promoting wellness issues, also defining things that are relative to health and to happiness and to our well-being. And so yes, produce was a big part of my life for about 10 years. I was in charge of coordinating the generic promotion of fresh fruits and vegetables through what was then known as the Fresh Approach program. And I loved it because that was my bailiwick, is that I could do whatever I felt was necessary with a very limited budget, I might say.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
But it was a lot of fun because people need to know, especially now, do they need to know how critical fruits and vegetables are, and organic foods for their health.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, like I said, the story that we're going to share with everybody is, as the title talks about, a toxic brain, right? But it's also a story of your husband, and it's a story of your journey. That journey. I don't even know if journey is, in my mind, the right word. I mean, it is beyond. I mean, it's an adventure of a lifetime. It's nuts. It's craziness. You listen to the story and you go, huh? Why? How's this? How's that? So with that being said, I'm going to dive into the book. Obviously, we want to talk about it, but I want to throw a few things out there to get people kind of wrapped around this conversation if we can. And one of the things I thought to open up with the question to really get this ball rolling is what's the focus of conventional medicine today in America?
Well, conventional medicine really was established back in the early 20th century. And it's a medical model that is focused on looking at the symptoms, not the underlying root causes of things. And so they're really good at acute infections and trauma cases. But when it comes to chronic illness, they're not really set up with the right tools right now in order to do that. But it really focuses then on treating symptoms. And so people can have a medication. It's usually based on medications or surgeries. That's kind of the model that they use.
Right.
And, so what we're dealing with now it's conventional medicine is using 20th century tools for 21st century chronic illnesses.
Wow.
And what I found out through this is that we need to uncover the root cause in order to heal, because otherwise you're just throwing pills, as they did at my husband. I guess should I back it up a little in terms of,
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. You say whatever the hell you want to say, Carol. I'm here just to listen and to support and to throw my questions. But yeah, I mean, one of the questions go ahead.
The story had so many different pieces to it, and so I'll back up and saying, at 59, my husband, as far as I knew, was in perfect health. In fact, he had only gone to a doctor about 6 months before, and he got a clean bill of health, and so that was fine. But one morning, I awoke to find him with tremors, just shaking. His behavior, he was always just very grounded. Well, he was like in a different dimension. He had an oozy rash all over his body. He had difficulty opening his eyes. And so there were all these symptoms that I had never seen before.
Right.
And so went to the doctor and said, oh, you're going to have to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital. He was, reviewed with all the conventional tools of MRIs and CAT scans and blood work, and, nothing was revealed. And I go, well, wait a minute, there's something obviously going on here, because he was definitely dealing with some behavior issues that I had never noticed at all before. And we were married for 30 years. I mean, a long time.
You kind of figured it out by then.
Kind of had known this was unusual. So, so it took a year to just going to specialist after specialist, trying to find what's going on, and no one could determine. They kind of honed in on the psychiatric issues, the behavior issues. But I said, that doesn't include why he can't open his eyes, or why he's got this rash, or he had these weird abdominal thrusts, all of a sudden I go, what's that? And no one could explain or put it all together.
Right.
So fortunately, this, I have to say, was met with some really, I think, divine interventions at times, but was led to a functional practitioner. He was actually an internist, but he was very intrigued and had been doing a lot of research on toxicity, particularly biotoxins. And it was there that they found that my husband was genetically vulnerable. As it turns out, 25% of the population have poor detoxifying genes. And what this means is, when you get environmental exposures, you're not able to easily detoxify them. Your body just is compromised in doing that. So what happens is they continue to build and build and build. And so that's probably what happened, is a toxic body burden just like all of a sudden manifests, and so my body can't do anything more. But it did demonstrate that toxicity was at the core.
Wow.
Because these functional tests are biomarkers that are linked to inflammation. And that's what was going on, was tremendous neural inflammation that was causing all these strange behaviors. But
go ahead. No,
well, that wasn't confirmed. That wasn't ever confirmed in convention.
Right. Well, and so when you started to see these changes, how many different directions did conventional medicine take you? I mean, 10, 20?
Oh man, I lost count.
I mean, because it was mental, right? They're like, oh, he's got
psychiatric, gastroenterology, gerontology, internist, neurology. We went through a lot, and then we repeated them because we went into prestigious hospital, repeated the same test, the spinal taps, everything else. And nothing was revealed. So this was the key, is when nothing is revealed, they oftentimes think, well, must be psychiatric.
Right.
Or it's, psychological or something. I said, no, this is not one of those cases. I know that may be something, but it definitely was linked to underlying causes which were not being properly evaluated.
Yeah.
And when I brought up, when I finally learned that we are dealing with biotoxins, Lyme disease, mold, and then he also was tested for heavy metals. And he was, again, very high in lead, very high in mercury, and some of these other, heavy metals, toxic metals. And also, when you put it together, he had 20 years growing up, basically in his father's leather factory. The house was situated right by the leather tannery, and all the chemicals used in the production of tanning hides. And so that's what he used to jump in tanned hides as a kid. And then
sure.
Got this ongoing exposure to chemicals, to toxic metals, to the mold that most people don't know that there's a lot of mold that could be hiding in their houses, or
Absolutely.
that they got bit by a tick. That's a whole nother thing. Lyme disease is challenging to diagnose and treat.
So how long was this? I mean, how long was this journey? And I mean, this was not 2 months. This was how many years?
On 12.
12 years.
Not 12 years seeking specifically answers. So what happened is, while I got answers about the biotoxins the first little over a year, and I was, okay, clear, totally made sense, because he was manifesting the symptoms that I outlined in my book. Okay, that it was there. It was like, it made sense. I didn't like the fact that it was what it was, but at least it made sense. And then he continued to be tested. See, conventional didn't accept functional. They didn't accept. Right. And so they kept denying. They kept putting him on, medications that weren't getting. They had him on so many different chemical cocktails. And, he had probably polytoxicity, which is a combination of all these toxic sources and interactions of drugs and everything else happening. But so he was admitted to a state mental institution as long result of, he hipped me out of his care. I mean, it was really a bad situation. Lost his rational thinking, right, and hipped me out of his care and took away my power of attorney. So I was not able to serve in any capacity. I was actually legally blocked from doing that. But anyway, when I finally got guardianship of him, the doctors then would talk to me, and they said, we've done all these tests, and we just believe you're dealing with psychiatric issues here. We're going to try more combinations of drugs, and he'll be back to you. And I go, you don't understand. Yeah. At that point, I had learned about the detoxification protocols and other things that he should have been doing. They did not allow those things in the hospital, and he was there for 6 months. So, and that was what I met with, was a lot of resistance, because they're not trained. I mean, basically, conventional medicine is trained a certain way. They're trained to look at symptoms and come up with diagnosis based on it. But they're not trained to look at what's underlying that. And so It was sort of like, well, we don't understand that, so we're going by our model here.
Right, which of course, all these years later, and then ultimately, Rick succumbed to what was happening in his life, because he was just toxified, basically. So a couple of questions I want to throw in, and one of the things that came from this is a conversation around toxic Alzheimer's, which I don't think, I'm going to guess that the people who are listening to this probably never even heard of that before. It is legitimately real. It's out there. It's a part of this conversation. It's something that I didn't understand or know. It's like, holy crap. So going to throw a two-part out there. Let's talk a little bit about what a toxin, but what is toxic Alzheimer's, if you wouldn't mind, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of the frame up of where you kind of ended in all this.
Well, again, this whole journey was putting together puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And so he was diagnosed his last year with Lewy body dementia.
Right.
And Lewy body dementia, they didn't really know much about it. In fact, I'm surprised that no one really thought much about this. So then I was okay, so that's what he had. That was the diagnosis. I know it was caused by toxicity and other root causes, and it manifested as Lewy body dementia. But then while I was writing this book, I heard a podcast. I'd never listened to this podcast before. And again, divine. And there was Dr. Dale Bredesen, the author of The End of Alzheimer's and other books. He's a brilliant brain researcher. And he talked about the different types of Alzheimer's. It's not just where your memory fades. That's one type of Alzheimer's. But the type that he was talking about was a toxic type. And of course, my ears went up at that. I ordered his book and I'm reading, and he had a listing, and I have him also in my book. I asked permission to use it. And it described the characteristics of toxic Alzheimer's. It usually strikes early. There's certain biomarkers, which fortunately I had all my husband's lab work, and he aligned perfectly with toxic Alzheimer's. So then I reached out to Dr. Bredesen, who was kind enough to offer some insights. I said, look, if they diagnosed him with Lewy body dementia. At this point, he had already passed. My husband passed in 2016. Right. And so this was now 2017. And he said, you can actually manifest different forms of dementia. So you can have the tau tangles of Alzheimer's at the same time you have what are called Lewy bodies in your brain. And so they manifest, there's different symptoms. The thing with Lewy body, which is different from other dementias, is there's a characteristic which I did not know again until after he died. But I think it's important for anyone that might be dealing with this, or they're hearing, oh, that sounds, sounds like grandma. He could do what was called showtime, which means he was in assisted living or skilled nursing different times. And like my sister would come and visit, and he would be conversational. He was asking questions. And it's like people go, are you sure?
Right.
You sure he needs to be here? And it's like, yeah, this is just, after, again, another thing that I did not know, but I did put it in the book, that Lewy body, that is really one of the characteristics, is that you can kind of show up. And of course, his, another interesting background about Rick and his case is that his career was working on toxic tort cases.
Yeah, this is when you first told me that and was first heard, I was like listening to, and I heard you on a podcast, and I shared this, my mouth dropped. It's like, what? This is what this guy was, a guy fighting for all these people that were getting screwed over, whether it be asbestos or whether it was whatever it was, he was their champion. And now this. So please tell a little bit more about what he did. And I don't want to interrupt you, but it's like, holy shit, it's another thing of like, this is crazy.
It is. It's, he was a vocational rehabilitation specialist. So what he would do is he would be called in by attorneys to work on wage loss, generally wage loss of if you no longer can go to work and you're 50 years old, what's the long-term, salary and everything. So he would work on that, and he was brilliant at it. And attorneys just loved to go. They said, you had the right evidence that we needed to win that case. So he was working, yes, on asbestos cases. Sick building syndrome. Now, sick building syndrome is usually water damage, mold. It could be some of the chemicals that are used in carpets, paint, etc. So he was working on a class action suit for EPA's own sick building. And that is when, just discussing this case, this was long before his brain went down. But I would say, okay, this does not make sense. Why would some people working sometimes right next to a person who could no longer come to work, why could they not come to work? And others, it didn't affect them. And when I found that my husband wasn't able to get off the sofa, I got it. And that is because the genetics, 25% of the population are genetically vulnerable. So if they're sitting in a building and it's got mold in it or from water damage, or it's got, all these chemicals, it can impact them, but it's not something that conventional goes after. So you need to look at the root causes. And what was even more interesting is then he had his private litigation business. And I had to turn away his business, and I had to eventually close his business because it was obvious he was not coming back to it. And so I would kind of go through some of the files to see, did I need to keep this for any reason? And what was interesting is that those symptoms that they were dealing with were many of the same symptoms of my husband.
I'm telling you, this story is an absolute, it's wild.
Todd, I say it's a story for our toxic times.
Yeah.
What my realization was that this was not a rare case, that they couldn't figure it out. And I thought, oh my gosh, it must be so rare. They just have no idea what they're dealing with. But in fact, once I got toxicity, I understood that. And then I'm looking in the neurology offices and I'm looking at the hospital hallways and all those people and I'm going, whoa, I wonder if they might actually be dealing with this.
Yeah.
In fact, there was an interesting experience when he was hospitalized and he was sharing a room. And someone that had just shown up telling me about the possibility of toxicity in causing these problems. When you hear about, they don't really know what might be the reason for this. A lot of times it is these root causes that aren't being explored, with toxicity being one. So I was reading this book, which was written by Dr. Shoemaker, called Desperation Medicine. And they're describing these similar, symptoms and experiences. And when he said, if you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune issue, if you've been, had depression, if you have anxiety, a lot of these cases are actually linked to toxicity.
Yeah.
At that point, this roommate opened the curtain between us and he said, I've been here getting my brain zapped off and on for 10 years. I live in a house with mold. I wonder if this is my case.
Yeah. It's overwhelming to hear this, because as I experienced in the journey of connecting with you and getting a part of this, people just don't get it. They don't know. And it's not that I shouldn't say don't get it, because that's mean, but they just don't know. They just don't, they're not put in a position in a lot of ways. And you've described it so eloquently, and I can relate to it in my own life with my son. They go where they know to go, and they stay in the lane that they're told to stay in through conventional medicine, and they're stuck in that lane. And that's as far as they go. I think about this with my son. My son was sick when he was 17. And he was diagnosed with brain cancer. It's kind of a shocking experience as a parent at that age, at any age, but it's a pretty shocking conversation to have. We took him to a hospital here in California, and they worked with them, and they said that the symptoms that he was showing are not in relation to what the brain cancer is. They said he was faking it. Literally said that the symptoms he had, that he was faking. No, I can't bullshit. I cannot bullshit that story. So I can relate so much to this story personally. And in my own life experience of my family, all of it, we have to start to empower ourselves to ask questions, to get more involved, to challenge what your doctors are saying, to to empower yourself, because we live in an age today that we have so much information that we've never had access to before. Right. And we're seeing it now in so many ways where things that people are doing behind the scenes are now coming to the surface, right? And be like, you should be doing that, right? That's happening. And it needs to be the exact same way with our medical care. So you wrote this book, right? And I said in the beginning of the show, there's two stories here, and I don't want to downplay, but it is. There's a story of your journey, of what you went through with Rick, and it's mind blowing when you get to that. But it's also a story about our toxic times and what we're dealing with, and what you've pulled away from this, and what your experiences has taught you. But not only the experiences you dealt with Rick, but let's be honest, your life has taken you on a path that puts you in a position to really grasp what was happening. You've got that perspective of what your background is. So talk to me, if you can, why are we living in toxic times today?
Oh, well, our toxic exposures are unprecedented. Our food, our air, our water, consumer products, everywhere, we are dealing with so much toxic exposure on a daily basis. Multiple, the cosmetics, everything that we, in our world, it is just not good for us usually. Right. It has some impact to us on health, but it's not been evaluated as to toxic exposures. And there is no safe exposure of some of these things like mercury. There is really no safe amount. Now my husband had a mouthful of amalgams.
Right.
50% of them are composed of mercury.
Yeah.
That is right near your brain.
Yeah.
And I'll use myself as an example, being the baby boomer I am. I also had a mouthful of amalgams, and I developed a brain tumor. And it was noted around the same time I was dealing with my husband. My mom was dealing with I was dealing with her and caregiving with her and her Alzheimer's and colon cancer and everything else. And then they diagnosed me. It's like, whoa. But you talked about your son. I had a dinner party, and there were actually, I think 7 of us at the table, and 4 of us had or dealing with a brain tumor. So something is going on. And that also, there's a lot of exposure now to things that can affect our brains. And that's why we do have to be very proactive. I can't just sit there and hold my cell phone to my ear anymore. So
it's amazing to me. And to come back around on what I shared about my son, it was amazing when I found different doctors and said, this is what we're dealing with. And they're like, okay, great. Well, get back. This was bad. We went to Boston to deal with back there with the doctors. And when we talked to them, they're like, okay, well, we'll see him on December 20th or whatever it was. Great. How long's the appointment? Oh, there's no appointment. He's coming back from surgery. We got to get this out of his brain. This is what's causing everything. So you get this difference of opinions. Wow. And I think that's what's really my point that I want to make. And I think you illustrated beautifully. Don't be stuck with what they tell you. And get involved and be a part of it. Because when you talk about toxicity, right, you clearly talk about, our immune system and what it's doing to us and how our immune systems are under attack because of this, and we don't recognize it. So, talk about that a little bit when it comes to the immune system and toxicity, because it's a big part of what you talk about, and it's incredibly powerful.
Toxicity flares inflammation, and then the inflammation causes a lot of dysregulation of the immune system. So you've got your body that's very unbalanced, then trying to fight off, various toxins, various, pathogens, different things that are invading the body, and it can't do the job. And that's why so many people now are being diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. Now, initially, the biotoxin researcher diagnosed my husband with toxic encephalopathy. I said, okay, what would you call this based on these biomarkers? He said, toxic encephalopathy. But there's a lot of other things. And this is, again, back to his background of these cases in the 1980s that started coming up, like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. And, these weird things that we had not heard about before. And now they've just skyrocketed in terms of the statistics, because they're really, if you think of it as like inflammatory illnesses with different manifestations. So, MS has a little different manifestation than, lupus or something, but there's a lot of similarities. But yeah, the immune systems are being attacked. And that's really what happened in Rick's case, is that of course, we have the gut brain and the autoimmune issues, and then that caused a neuroinflammation, which ended up in a brain disorder.
Right. Well, neurotoxicity obviously is toxicity of the brain, right? And
Right.
I think that's something that doesn't get discussed a lot. And I don't think people recognize, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe I shouldn't generalize it so much, but toxins affect the brain in a whole lot of ways. And I want to make sure that I don't want to leave this on the table. If there's something more that you want to bring up in regards to that, I want to make sure that we get it out there for people to kind of grasp, because we're throwing a lot of information at people right now. They're getting right crosses and left hooks and a couple of jabs here and there. And they've got to be thinking to themselves, holy shit, what is happening around me right now? Which is why I feel your book is so incredibly powerful, but yet so valuable for people to pick up, read, and go, whoa. Right. I mean, your book is a whoa moment. There's no two ways about it. It is such a worthy read. It's quite frankly, it's frightening in a lot of ways, Sandy. I gotta lie to you. It's like, it's scary, right? And start to think about things in my past, and try to put my feet in your path for a little bit. It's a trip, man. It's a trip. So talk a little bit about this neurotoxicity and what you've taken away from that as far as your experience with Rick, in the sense of like what you have learned, how powerful it is.
Neurotoxicity is toxic assault of the brain. And the challenge is, it's not often viewed. It's not often thought about. And I found something after while writing my book. It was too late, but it really talked about how these things are not well assessed. Again, if you're assessing and you can look at the brain from a different perspective than just relying on the conventional methods. Now, there is a lot of new research and a lot of new things that have come up so that people can look at the brain, and they just have to be able to, order some of these tests. A volumetric MRI is different from a regular MRI, and it can show shrinkage. It can show different parts of the brain that are being affected. But neurotoxicity, with all of our toxic exposure, it's linked. Neurotoxicity is linked to depression. It's linked to, any really mental health issues. And because it gets back to the gut and the brain, and there's such a connection there. And I know that you've talked about this on earlier shows, but the microbiome and all, we have to look at it all. So, the neurotoxicity is causing so many problems. It can manifest in any number of symptoms. And so a doctor might diagnose, they've got MS, when in fact, they're not looking at what caused the MS. And actually with MS, mold can show as unidentified, what's called unidentified bright objects in the brain on an MRI. And I had an MRI, and I had them in my brain. And it turns out that not only Rick was a poor detoxifier, I'm also a poor detoxifier. Wow. So I'm very susceptible to all these environmental exposures. Turns out I took my mom to the same biotoxin researcher. Turns out she had the genetics. Turns out other family members had them. So we have to know, and this is something that we're not really looking at. We got to look at what's our susceptibility to these things.
Right.
And we don't, genetic testing can be very valuable. But it shows if you're prone. I did not know. I wouldn't have known that I was prone to this. But I also, once I found out we were dealing with mold, I tested for, mold in the house, and sure enough, it was down in the basement where my husband had an office, and we had a little water seep in, during heavy rains or something.
Sure, whatever, right.
There was nothing in the closet that mattered, so we didn't deal with it. But sure enough, that was building up and causing inflammation coupled with all the other exposures he had. And then, of course, it was building up. I had the same thing. I was living in the house with mold, and I had the same system. He had the most extreme vulnerability. Mine isn't that extreme, but it still makes me in that 25%. So again, people don't know. This calls for really looking at, there's some very simple tests. These tests are not that difficult. They just need to be ordered.
Right.
A heavy metals test can tell you, what are you dealing with? And it turns out I went through all this functional testing myself. And it turns out I was high in lead. I was high in some other things. And so I had to detoxify. I learned about the importance of detoxification. And of course, this is not something that conventional is really addressing. You need to detoxify. But we really are living in a time with too much environmental exposure. And if, our bodies are building up too many toxins, and it's called a body burden. It's called your toxic body burden.
No doubt.
And then your body just can't operate. Everything, it goes out of balance. So
unbelievable. Well, I want to get into functional medicine a little bit, because I'm a big believer that it is, quite frankly, should be covered by every insurance company. It should be a part of the American medical plan. I think Western medicine, I think modern medicine, love it. Nothing against it. I get it. I understand what they are. And it's a big business now, and it's kind of a crazy business to dissect, but functional medicine is also really important. And you think about what, let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food, right? And there's a reason why that somebody said that thousands of years ago, kids, right?
Genius.
They figured it out. So, when I think about functional medicine, and I started researching this, and you shared some stuff with me, and I extracted something out that somebody said that you had shared with me, that there's 370 illnesses directly related to deficiencies just in calcium.
Right.
So think about that, right? That's not 370 illnesses directly related to a deficiency just in calcium, right? And I think we've seen it through the pandemic with vitamin D and some of these other things that we're talked about. So with that being said, let's get into this functional medicine thing, because it has to be a part of the conversation in our health system today. It has to be a part of what parents talk to their pediatricians about. It has to be a part of what we teach kids in school, why food is important, why taking care of themselves, why, we need to start dealing with this, folks. We just can't keep burying this, right? So how important is food in all of this? And how is it important? And even in relationship to what Rick went through?
Well, food is critical. It is absolutely critical. And yet look at what people are eating. We're eating so many edible food-like substances. And that's not going to nourish our bodies. We need 90 nutrients daily. We need 60 minerals. We need 16 vitamins. We need 12 amino acids. We need 2 fatty acids. We need all of that. And our food simply
doesn't do it anymore.
Because it's not, for one thing, of course, as you know, with the produce today, it's the soil has just been deteriorated, and doesn't have the nutrients in the soil to uptake those wonderful nutrients into the fruit or vegetable. And so we're dealing with crop issues. We're dealing with people aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables. They're looking at other things. There's obviously a lot of processed foods. People are dealing with convenience and challenge for time. A lot of them just don't want to take the time to cook fruits and vegetables, or healthy organic foods. And so they select, and there is a lot of, people running to fast food, and that's not going to provide what their bodies really need. The body was meant to really function and healthy, and yet we've got to supply the right fuel for it. And so definitely eating anti-inflammatory foods, which, now we know that fruits and vegetables are so important. And I'm just so grateful for my background in promoting them. But we've got to eat more anti-inflammatory foods. And unfortunately, there's so much education that's needed in terms of what to select. And I mean, even, I try to stay up on top of things, but sometimes, I picked up something one time and I go, oh, wait a minute. No, we can't do that. Can't do those artificial sweeteners, can't do some of the things that are put in the foods.
Well, look at the one now they just pulled out. They just came out with one of the artificial sweeteners, just, been around for 20 years. And they're like, oh, hey, guess what? It's bad now, kids. Yeah. It's the same thing they do with pesticides. They're good, right? They're great. And everybody loves them. And they talk all about them until they're not, like, oh yeah, that's not good for you anymore. We're all guinea pigs here. We've seen it through the vaccine. We've seen it all the time with our food. We see with all the different things that are happening. We were chatting about this earlier, gene editing food is now coming, right? We're all going to be guinea pigs on that. And so is the planet with things like that.
We have to really get back to Mother Nature and always, because we've gotten so far, when we look at when did our health start to deteriorate? Now, I was just a little while ago looking at a photo from the 70s, people on the beach. There was no obesity. Mm-hmm. And now the obesity rate is, I think, about 2/3. It's about 2/3 of the population. Yeah. And that's a lot of the biochemical reactions and how all of this toxic and other inflammatory things are causing our bodies to not function the way that they're designed. Yeah. And so, yes, but food is so critical, and we need to really select the foods that are going to also support our brain. We need to understand the importance of fat in our diet. And again, that was when I was working at the Fruit and Vegetable Association, that was during the whole, the new dietary guidelines, and they had, different things about, try to eat low fat and whatever. Now it's been shown for your brain, especially, we need fat in our brain. And not to be concerned with some of the things that we have been concerned with in the past.
100%. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I extracted are some of the stuff that you've sent. We've gone back and forth with, and I love what was said. It says the body will heal itself. This is what natural medicine, homeopathic medicine, functional medicine believe. The body has some kind of spiritual or divine intelligence to heal.
Yes.
And if we feed it what it needs every single day. So when you think about functional medicine, which is, to your point, vitamins, minerals, it's also getting to the root cause. It's not, right. you have a runny nose. Well, why? Oh, you have a cold. That's more than that. Maybe it's digging deeper into understanding. So how important was, and I want to make sure that we covered, hopefully people extracted a little bit about what functional medicine is based on what we said. I don't want to leave, but I'm sure people are pretty hip to it now in some way, but how important go ahead.
Well, I actually have this chart here, which I know you can't read, but what it does is it really shows what functional medicine is, because it wasn't really around like it is starting to really grow. But when I was looking for answers, no one said go to a functional doctor. I actually found one only through this biotoxin researcher, but there were many. So functional medicine is patient-centered. It's really a very personalized approach. You get to go into the doctor and you sit there maybe 45 minutes, an hour talking. They go over a lot of information as opposed to your 7 minutes or whatever is allowed in convention. The body operates as an integrated system, not just different. We were talking about the specialties before, and I have examples of how, what part of the elephant are you looking at, and so it's a totally integrated system. Gene expression can be altered. This is different because with conventional, it's like gene expression is not changeable, which means you can have a propensity to a particular malady. For instance, I am sensitive to mold, okay? But because I'm being very proactive in knowing what I need to eat, in doing the right exercise, in trying to, do all the things that have been proven to support your health, I'm not manifesting those symptoms that would otherwise probably
be there. Right.
Health is about vitality, and with conventional, health is the absence of disease. So it's how do you feel? I'm all about vibrant aging. It's like, I love the stories of people, the doctor that I just heard about, she's 103 and still practicing medicine. I love stories like that because you have a life. I saw through my husband what life became at 59, dealing with a brain that's not working, dealing with no energy, dealing with no answers. Your whole life is transformed. And we want to take control, and that's what's beautiful about functional medicine, because you really have to be responsible under the guidance of a functional practitioner to do the things that will support your vitality.
Yeah.
And then functional is focused on root cause, not symptoms.
And I think that's so pivotal for people to hear, is that, and again, I'm not bashing Western medicine. I'm not. That is not the case. It's at all. We got to have it. It's got its purpose. Yes. But I think you bring up such a great point of, is that it? That's the only thing, is just go do that. That's the only thing I can do, right? I could go take that pill and that's going to solve, because it seems like we spend so much time in this country creating medicine to mask symptoms and not solve problems.
They don't. They treat the symptom.
Right.
And that's why when you get into, and this is where food plays such a critical role, when you're fueling your body with the healing foods, with the anti-inflammatory foods, and you're also taking up an exercise program, it's called lifestyle medicine. It's stress management. No question. We're all dealing with stress. But there are some things that we can do that will help us to manage that stress. And it's critical because stress ignites that cortisol, which causes, a lot of inflammation in the body. So they're just things we have to be the ones that say, I'm not going down there. I had my dad with Parkinson's, my mom with Alzheimer's and colon cancer. And I said to my husband, I said, I'm not going down that way. That's not how I want to age. No. And so, it just means I have to, give up gluten. Not too happy about that, but,
one of the things that I believe in and I think are working diligently to articulate, especially through this platform and in the things that I talk about now, is that I believe that for us to get out of this health rut that we are in as a society and as a nation, that we need to be a lot more transparent about what's in our food supply. Yes. And stop, I had an amazing conversation with the Environmental Working Group, Crop Life America, which represents the pesticide industry, and a dietitian. We all talked about pesticides in food. And I made the claim and made the statement, why don't we just start labeling? Why don't we, if pesticides are okay and everybody's fine with using them, why not just confront them head on and let people know what's in their food? Why don't we just start to educate people? Because that's how we're going to change things. I believe we start with our kids. We start working with better food in the school systems, getting them on that track and letting them understand the difference between, fat, sugar, and salt and what it all is. And then start putting on, it's like, why not? If, look, if putting Roundup, if you're using it around your farm, it's on your crop, great. Tell people about it. Let them make the choice that says, well, maybe I don't want that.
Right. Well, there's a lot. In fact, can I read? It's about a paragraph or so.
You can read whatever the hell you want, girl.
It's about how do we resolve some of this? Because it's not just one thing. It's a combination of so many factors. So I just want to read, because that was going through my mind. Making vibrant wellness a national priority requires new initiatives within a consortium across all arenas, impacting health incomes. Imagine what would manifest nationally throughout participation in a top priority health commitment, a collective vision, mission, and purpose. This may sound unrealistic, yet if we are to create a nation of energized, healthy citizens, then participation of all parts related and the whole is essential. And then we need to look at our schools, our healthcare facilities, our policymakers, the regulators, our insurance companies, the food producers, the consumer product manufacturers, advertisers, media, and others in vital. It would help create an interconnected web of health promotion, production, environmental oversight, and more. It would promote and provide the healthiest of foods available at home, in restaurants, hospitals, and other institutions, offer environmentally safe products and systems to protect the environment, provide revolutionary healing modalities, promote inspiring messaging regarding positive lifestyle choices, and more. Adopting such a shared vision through uniting together would be transformational.
I 100% agree with everything that you have just said. It absolutely would, and we're afraid to do it. And I think because it's become such a big business, life has become a very big business.
Right.
Right. And so why do you think that, and I said this in the opening and I stand by it now, functional medicine should be a part of everybody's insurance policy. It should be a part of what is into all that's being taught to the upcoming doctors and medical professionals are coming in. It needs to be a part of the curriculum. It doesn't need to be a 2-day lecture on it. It needs to be really, really studied and a part of a long process of how to better health. Why isn't functional medicine more integrated into our healthcare system?
Well, that's kind of a
that's a tough one
statement, but I'll tell you, the experience of not that without insurance to cover it, this leaves a lot of people outside of the ability to access functional medicine because it's expensive.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, and not just a few dollars, it can be very expensive.
It can be very expensive.
And yet, if you want answers, and this is why I promote one of the things in my book, The Revelation. If you want answers right now, that's where you're going to get them. Yeah. And unfortunately, not everyone has access to that.
Yeah.
So no, the current system is, it will look at, the labs and the consultations and things from conventional, but functional, no. Maybe an occasional lab might be paid, but no, it's a system that is not workable. And this is why I promote a paradigm shift. We need a paradigm shift to dealing with all these factors that we're dealing with all the toxins. There's not, I have this is another thing from my book, but it's backwards, I guess, but it's inflammation, all these things that are causing inflammation. Right. We've got to address those, or we're going to continue to just fire up all these chronic illnesses. And I think the Institute of Functional Medicine has something on their website that says 86% of illnesses are chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
And if we're not addressing those from root cause, we're just perpetuating a system that's not going to really heal.
Well, I think the system wants it to be perpetuated. I think the system has become very big business. I mean, you have how many insurance companies own how many hospitals? How many hospitals own, how many of those insurance companies own all the laboratories? Where does big pharma play into it? Say what you want. It's a freaking racket, right? And we're all the guinea pigs in this racket. And it's because people are just accept, I hate to say it, but a lot of times we're sheep looking for a shepherd out there. And I think it's really dangerous when it comes to our health. I think it's dangerous when it comes to our food. And it needs to be these conversations like we're having need to be out in the ethos for people to start asking questions of their own life and what their doctors are.
And there's a quote that I have in my book that it really talks about at no other time have we had to be so proactive in our education. Because if we're not, we're just going to go down and go, okay, I guess I have to take this for a while and whatever. When in fact, my realization was, oh my God, had we known about toxicity. And the fact that you can look for these things if you're testing for them. You could take a very preventive and proactive approach to your healthcare. But if you don't know about them,
Right.
then these situations can get out of hand, which is really what happened to Rick. So who was too far down the inflammatory pathway to really bring him back.
Yeah, and your point about the cost, it's crazy. It is what it is. I mean, and it's unfortunate, but it is incredibly expensive. When you think about communities that are already underserved, you think about communities that have high rates of diabetes because of what's in the bodega. You have high rates of heart disease. You have high rates of a lot of different issues, all of which aren't even being talked about inside those communities as ways to heal. As if you did this, you might not be able to have to take that any longer. We need to switch it. That integration needs to come. And what's frightening to me, when I got into Alzheimer's, I got into toxic Alzheimer's and what Rick went through in your journey and what you went through, Alzheimer's and related dementia costs could hit $2 trillion
Absolutely.
by 2030.
Absolutely.
Trillion. That's not a B. That's not an M. That's a T.
And I look at, the case where I was dealing with, and thank goodness we had purchased long-term care insurance 18 months or so.
Oh my God, you'd have been buried.
Absolutely. Because the cost, and I mean, when, at first I had him home for about a year, and then a number of things happened and his brain went, he went in a whole different cycle and he had to be, he had to be in assisted living, and then he had to be in memory care, and then he was in skilled nursing care. And I mean, it's ungodly expensive. And I'm going to bring up another thing, which was another revelation through our healthcare facilities. Look at what they're serving on trays.
Yeah. Well,
no, it's it's almost like there's so much to know, but when you see it there on a tray and you see, oh my gosh, that's not going to be very healing for them. But but that's what they're getting offered.
Industrial food for industrial medicine, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people should not have now. I mean, the gluten is causing a lot of problems, largely because of GMOs, and so that is firing up inflammation. And by, again, making some dietary changes, sometimes we just have to bite the bullet and we have to get off things that we really love to enjoy. But, you got to say, I want to be healthy, I want to be vibrant, or I'm going to have this croissant today.
Yeah, but to that point, and I'm going to bang this drum, the reason why we go, okay, I'm going to eat that, is because our kids are brought up on sugar, salt, and fat. That's where their palate is carved.
Yes.
Right. And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the problem starts, is that, we get them while they're young, make it appealing. It's no different than smoking. It's no different than anything else. Get them while they're young, and we got them when they get, let's get them until they can't, till we can't get them anymore.
Right.
Right. And it's dangerous. And I think that food is such an important part of all this, and that this change, this embracing of our, of agriculture and what it can do for us. I mean, you want to fix the climate? Get smart about agriculture. You want to improve people's health? Get smart about agriculture. Right. You want to change people's, you want to change the medicine side of things and make functional medicine more appealing. Start working with the damn food, because so much it affects everybody. Food, water, and sun connects us all.
Right. It does. Back to nature. To nature. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so powerful. And again, your story is just, it's amazing. I mean, it's I don't even know how it's got me speechless, right? Because I've gone through it with you, and I've talked with you multiple times. I've read, I've seen it. I've heard it. It shouldn't have happened. Let's go with that.
Well, it shouldn't have happened, but it did. So now I learned. And so actually, again, another piece another thing that I learned was that a lot of the cognitive decline is now known to be reversible. Right. So that's the good news that came from this. I mean, once he was given a dementia diagnosis after 3.5 years, I kind of resolved myself. Yes, I knew it was caused by the toxicity, but okay, this is what it ended up, and that's what it is. And so he continued to do the detoxification, but it's like I said, okay, to me, it was irreversible at that point.
Right.
Now, what I learned through Dr. Bredeson's research is that patients that have cognitive decline and, not able to drive and other things, they do the lifestyle medicine, they eat the right foods, they exercise, they do, social interaction and everything, and their brains are coming back. And they've got lots of testimonials now.
Well, it goes back to what I said. The body wants to heal itself. It's what it's designed to do. Right.
But we've been told, again, it's looking at a narrative. We've been told it's irreversible. And so it's a positive message that I come with, and that is they now know that you can reverse it by digging down. And by the way, there's a recommended test. Again, right now it's a functional test, but wouldn't it be great if that's integrated into conventional, into our regular healthcare? And that is something that Dr. Bredeson calls a cognoscopy. So that it's recommended about the age of 45 that you have an assessment, and it checks for, various things, blood work, and it can include a volumetric MRI. And I had one done. And it was most enlightening to see, like, well, wait a minute, I kind of make excuses for some of the things, but now they know if you can take that and they're able to address those particular things. There's what Dr. Bredeson says, at least at one point, it was 36 different root causes that can contribute to cognitive decline. And so if you address those, you don't have to go through the inflammatory pathway.
Right.
You get your health destiny back. And I'm about saving health destinies. We don't want to go down this way. We look at those, the statistics you talk about, and the horror of that. It's collateral damage. That's another thing that came, from the journey, is the collateral damage of the financial impact of that. I was scrambling through, trying to get answers through functional, but both my husband and I, we were independent consultants. There was no one picking up the tab for us.
Right.
And then the other thing is not having a diagnosis. There's a lot of misdiagnosis that goes on. Not having a specific diagnosis, other than for a while, it was like, he had some depression, or he had some other things, or, some people thought he was bipolar. And he lost his colleagues because his behavior became weird.
Right.
But he had, I did a lot to preserve his reputation, but after a while, he destroyed it because of a bad brain. So in all that, if I had known what I was dealing with, but I didn't know for a long time what I was dealing with, and then it wasn't validated. And that's where Dr. Bredeson's research in his End of Alzheimer's, it validates the toxic aspect of toxic Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And that was so critical, because throughout the entire 12 years, all this toxicity, while I knew it and all these biomarkers confirmed it and research was showing things, it was still not validated. And so I was really on my own trying to figure it out.
Well, and you know what? And that's I think that's, to me, is incredibly sad, the feeling of being all on your own. I felt that with my son. I was on and on. I'll never forget coming home and getting on the Google machine for 3 hours trying to figure out how I was going to save my son's life. Helpless, trying to find somebody that would listen. And if I've done it, somebody else has done it. You've done it. Other people. And the thing is that we shouldn't have to do that. We should, in this great country, right, with all that we have, let alone take away all the stuff that we waste and the stupid things that we do, that all that we have, we're still stuck in second gear, trying to be healthy and trying to be a healthy nation, right, and try to live a healthy lifestyle. And quite frankly, I think a lot of it has to do with capitalism. I think a lot of it has to do with the money that's being generated is made by, let's do this because it's better. And I think you go back and you look at the GMO argument, you look at Pesticide Institute, all of
artificial sweeteners,
all fits everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this, and you know, what advice would you give someone today that you wish you'd gotten at the beginning of all this journey?
Oh, wow. What advice? First of all, you got to learn. I think about not accepting just what you hear, just
Yeah.
what information they say. This is the diagnosis, and you have to just go, maybe that's what you're seeing, but I'm not so sure that's what it was. So I think being proactive in terms of that. There's different phases of this too, as I would really look at the root causes of functional. You got to go functional.
Yeah.
In order to really, if you know, I was intent. Because it didn't make sense of what happened to my most grounded guy, and so by finding out the root cause, and so people, when they find out the root cause, I think it gives you such insights that you didn't have before. And so definitely exploring root causes are important. And then regarding the dementia, you have to know that there's different types of dementias out there. But my husband could still have played somewhat of a game of Trivial Pursuit. That part of his brain wasn't what went. It was his executive function and his ability to make good choices, and crazy making behavior. That's all I can say. It was totally.
Oh yeah. Sure. So powerful.
You got to know, what you're dealing with.
100%. I mean, what a powerful story. And all I can think of from this that you shared is for people to ask their insurance companies, ask their employers, ask whoever their representatives are, why they can't get functional medicine into their insurance. And if you don't get a good answer, then call your representative, call your congressman, ask your senator. Say, why can't this be a part? You guys are regulating everything else we're trying to do in the world. Why can't we get this to be a part of the conversation? Why can't we get some support and help on curing some of these things rather than just keep throwing medicine at a symptom and not getting to the root cause? It
is my personal belief that we're going to be seeing some changes in our healthcare system. I can't say when, but I think it's become obvious now. There's more and more doctors that are recognizing that the tools that they were using aren't effective in treating the illnesses, the chronic illnesses of today.
Yeah.
And I think there is going to be a push because people, you can't deny these transformations, and so I think we are going to see that. I don't know when, but I do believe there's new things that different healing frequencies and kind of things that may seem woo-woo right now. But I think we're going to be looking at, light. I talk about some of these evolving technologies.
Yeah.
And they've shown that the light therapy on vets really has been healing.
Correct.
And so I think we're going to see there's more things that are down the road for us, so that while we're frustrated right now, I think we are going to be experiencing major changes that will help to support vibrant lives. Really critical. Again, our kids' health is not what it was either.
No, I agree with you. I think that there are changes, and I think we're coming out of the pandemic. I think it opened up people's eyes to maybe being a little less accepting of what they hear and be a little more open-minded to asking questions or getting more involved and to really say, is that really the right thing to do, right, and why? Right. I think it's incredibly important. What's next for you on your journey? I mean, you are out here, talking about your book, you're out changing the world, you're opening up people's eyes. I think your conversation we've had today is incredibly impactful. It impacted me before we even had the conversation. And I think it's going to impact people on the other end of this as well. So what's next?
Right now, I'm just promoting the message. I believe, but beyond this, throughout my entire career, I see something that I think needs more information, needs to be explored. Consumers need to understand more, and I go after it. And so I'm not quite sure, but I think there's so much happening now, and particularly this whole area of what we're eating and seeing what's happening to our food system, that we do have to make some major changes. So
I don't disagree. You're not going to get an argument with me on that.
Right.
Because we do.
And
I love it. Well,
eat organic. I got it all through my book. It's so important to do the right thing, to minimize. We have to look at minimizing our risks. So what can we do? We know we live in this toxic world. We're in a toxic stew. What can we do? And so that's where we have to look at the food that we're eating. What are we eating our food on? Look at what are we cooking our food with? There's so many toxic things that are used in pots and pans and other things. Looking at how can we reduce our risk for, toxicity in the air, mold exposure, air purifiers. We just have to be just thinking, how can I, knowing that this exists, not burying our head in the sand. Okay, we live in a toxic world. That's a given. Okay, there's some things that you're willing to do, maybe some things you're not willing to do. But the more that you can embrace reducing the toxicity, reducing the inflammation in your body is going to enhance your health tremendously.
100% agree. Yeah, it's a great message for people to take away from all that we've talked about. And I can't recommend your book enough. I hope, A Toxic Brain: Revelations from a Health Journey is a great read. It will open your eyes. It'll scare you a little bit, but the bottom line issue is it's going to make you think. And I think that's where we have to start getting these conversations, is we've got to start getting people to think about them and how does it relate to their own life, and how does it affect me, and why does it affect me, and should it affect me, and should I be concerned, and what are the simple things that I can do to make a difference. And I think you brilliantly shared that with everybody. You shared from your heart the experience that you went through, which, like you said, is a long, arduous journey that you went through with Rick. It's again, I'm speechless trying to come up with words for it. It's an overwhelming experience to sit through that book that you've written. And I hope that people pick it up.
And that was my pay it forward. That was my gift. That's actually Rick's gift, because that was one of his favorite movies, was Pay It Forward. The idea of something happens, someone gives you something and you pay it forward to someone else. And so this was a collection of kind of the things that I learned, the puzzle pieces that did come together for me. And to share that, so that, and I have heard, the wonderful thing is that I have heard from people and they said, oh my gosh, I did go to a functional doctor. They found this.
Right.
I'm now feeling better. I'm not in pain. I'm not, it's like, yes, I know. It's
right.
So
powerful.
It is.
Awesome.
I just noticed, we switched computers.
I know, it's good. I know.
It's got my daughter's name.
It's got your daughter's name on it. It's all right. Trust me, they're going to know who you are. I'm going to make darn sure that people know who you are through our promotion, social media, and everything else. Don't worry about that. That's tiny on the screen. Don't worry about that. That will be fine. But thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being who you are, and thank you for sharing your journey, and thank you for the love you're putting out there in the world, right? Love and kindness, as we opened up the show with, right? You're putting a lot of love out in the world for people. And the thing that you're doing, and I think it's so important that I hope everybody grasps, is that you're loving people in the world with this story that you are never, ever going to meet. And I think that's a powerful thing when you give yourself that runway. You're trying to heal yourself. You're trying to teach. You're trying to educate. You're trying to share your experiences and giving advice where it needs to be based upon the circumstance that you went through. So it's incredibly powerful. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Much, much love from me to you. And I love hanging out with you, which I'm going to do after we're done with this and turn the camera off. And then I just to really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Pick up this book, open your minds, ask questions. I'm telling you, the power to help yourself is literally inside your brain, and you can do it. And this is a great read to help you walk that path. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Go inspire somebody today, like Sandy's inspired me to think and change and open my mind up to different ideas of what it's going to be. And that's how we're going to change the day, folks. Love and kindness is going to help, but Sandy's book's a big part of it too. Trust me. Thanks for being here. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Todd.